I was never the kind of woman who waited for surprises. Life had settled into a quiet, steady rhythm. Morning coffee, daily errands, a silent house, and a husband who spoke more to his emails than he did to me. I had accepted this version of love, told myself that relationships didn't require spark, only patience and routine. But then that day happened. My car gave a sputtering cough before dying completely on a nearly deserted street. Of course, I muttered, drumming my fingers on the steering wheel while reaching for my phone. I didn't even bother calling my husband. He never answered when I needed him. So I tried my son instead, hoping for better luck. "Mom, I can't come right now," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "But I'll send Alex." Alex, my son's best friend. It had been months, maybe even a year, since I last saw him. Back then, he was just a tall, skinny teenager who spent entire weekends invading our kitchen and calling me ma'am with a cheeky grin. I didn't have much of a choice, so I simply nodded to myself and waited. 15 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up beside mine, and Alex stepped out. But he wasn't the boy I remembered. He had grown, matured. The lanky teenager was gone, replaced by a tall, broad-shouldered man with confident steps and striking features. His dark hair was tousled just right, his jaw more pronounced, his posture relaxed yet self-assured. I blinked, trying to reconcile this man with the boy I remembered. "Hey, Mrs. Hayes," he greeted, flashing a familiar grin. "Need a lift?" I forced a polite smile, ignoring the strange warmth that bloomed low in my stomach. "Looks like it," I said as I climbed into the passenger seat. The air inside the car felt different, tense, charged. Maybe it was just that he was older, more grown up. Or maybe it was something else. The way he held himself, the subtle confidence in the way he rested one hand casually on the steering wheel, the way his eyes flicked toward me when he thought I wasn't watching. "Been a while, huh?" he said, eyes briefly scanning my face before focusing on the road. "Yes, it has," I replied, folding my hands in my lap. "You've changed." He chuckled low and smooth. "Growing up will do that." The conversation flowed easily, too easily. Yet underneath the words, something unspoken pulsed between us. I was too conscious of the deep tone of his voice, the way his fingers tapped rhythmically, the scent of his cologne that filled the small space around us. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves, just an overactive mind. Then at a red light he turned to me. His gaze lingered. "You haven't changed a bit." There was something in his voice, something that made my heart trip in my chest. I laughed softly, brushing off the sudden tension. "That's what happens when you get older. You just settle." His jaw tightened slightly, though he didn't say anything. When the light turned green, he looked away and continued driving. We didn't speak for the rest of the ride. When we reached my house, I unbuckled my seatbelt and reached for the door, ready to escape the strange current buzzing in my chest. But his voice stopped me. "You don't have to settle, you know." I froze and turned toward him. His face was unreadable, his tone calm, but something beneath his words made my breath catch. "Alex. See you around, Mrs. Hayes," he said with a small smile. His eyes, however, told a different story. I stepped out and closed the door, trying to ignore the way my heart thudded in my chest. It wasn't because of the broken car. I knew that much. I told myself it was just a fleeting moment, a random rush of emotions brought on by stress. But the memory of that drive clung to me like a shadow. I couldn't forget the way he'd looked at me. The quiet depth in his eyes. The weight of his words. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that it meant nothing, but I found myself more alert, more aware. The next time I saw him wasn't planned. I was at the grocery store, distracted while reaching for something on the top shelf. Without warning, a presence appeared behind me, warm, close. "Need a hand?" That voice, deep, smooth, sent a flutter through me before I even turned around. I stepped back, surprised by the jolt in my chest. "Alex," I said. He gave me a slow grin as he grabbed the item I'd been struggling with and handed it over. "Fancy running into you." "Just picking up a few things," I replied, doing my best to keep my voice even. Same here. He held up a shopping basket, but I barely saw what was in it. He was standing too close, close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. His presence was overwhelming, pressing against me in a way that made my skin hum. "Well, thanks," I said quickly, clinging to the box like a shield. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me again. "Can I ask you something?" Froze. "Sure." His eyes locked onto mine, intense but unreadable. "Are you happy?" It was such a simple question. And yet it felt like he had peeled back a layer of me I hadn't dared to touch. I should have laughed, dismissed it, redirected. But I didn't. I stood there blinking. Of course," I said, forcing a smile. Something flickered across his face, something quiet and knowing. But he didn't challenge the lie. He just nodded slowly. "Good." Then, as if sensing my need to escape, he stepped back. "See you around, Mrs. Hayes." I walked away quickly, my pulse racing. That night, as I sat at the dinner table across from my husband, his eyes glued to his phone, muttering about work, I answered his questions automatically, my mind elsewhere. "Am I happy?" Alex's question replayed in my head like a song on loop. Days passed, but the thought wouldn't leave. I caught myself glancing at my phone more than usual, hoping for a message that never came. I told myself it was silly, immature. He was just a kid, my son's friend. Confident, maybe flirtatious, but harmless. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. Not when he looked at me like he saw something more. Then, another coincidence. I was out walking in the neighborhood when I saw him again. He wasn't alone. A girl was clinging to his arm, laughing at something he said. My chest tightened unexpectedly, a sudden pang of jealousy that shocked me. I had no right to feel that way. I wasn't his anything. And yet I did. Before I could turn away, Alex noticed me. He said something to the girl and jogged over, leaving her behind. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, slightly breathless. "Didn't think I'd see you here." "Neither did I replied, keeping my voice tight and neutral. He looked back over his shoulder toward the girl. "She's just a friend." I didn't respond, but I didn't need to. He studied my face, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You were jealous," he said, no accusation in his voice, just a quiet, almost curious observation. I felt heat creep up my neck. "Alex, I like that you care." Those words. Simple, quiet, and yet they knocked the air out of me. I should have walked away then. I should have shut it all down before it unraveled. But I didn't. And neither did he.